Tom?
Mr. Scott, can you hear me?
Mr. Chairman?
How we doing? We have everybody or we waiting on some people?
A few more people were letting in now.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Cindy.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Okay, I'm ready when you are.
All right, Cindy, we're just waiting for a few more people. That's what Mr. Scott said. So,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, everybody that was waiting to get in is now in.
okay. All right, let's get this let's get it started. I guess we don't have no flag with us, but we'll stand for the pledge anyway. Remove your hats, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
United
States
States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with
liberty and
liberty
justice for all.
and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Introduce a few people here. We got Director of L&I, Tom Scott. Solicitor for the zoning board, Ken Fetterman. Our stenographer is Cindy Oliveira. And the members in attendance are Colleen Dunn, Sue Lewis, Jim McMahon, and I believe Ed Murphy
Correct.
is a new zoning board member. So he'll be also sitting in on the meeting. So with that being said, I think we got the zoning notices out of the way last meeting.
We did.
I guess we can continue with the presentation, or what you guys have to add to the presentation at this time?
All right, good evening, Mr. Scott, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. William Kerr. I'm an attorney with High Schwartz in Norristown, and I'm here representing the applicant. As you recall, this is a continuation from your February the 8th hearing. Just to give you a little bit of a refresher, I'm representing a joint venture between the Norton Avenue Baptist Church, BCM Affordable Housing at, excuse me, at Ingerman, which is an affordable housing, also an affordable housing developer. We're here tonight on 3 parcels that are owned by the Norton Avenue Baptist Church. The project we're proposing is a 56 unit senior affordable housing complex that will be built on each of the 3 parcels. The 3 parcels are separate and segregated by 2 different streets. So the proposal is for the entirety of this affordable housing complex to be built on the majority would be built on the existing, the main parcel where the church is, with some parking on 2 of the adjunct parcels that are across Watson and across Norton. As you recall from last time, both BCM Affordable Housing and Ingerman have significant track records developing affordable housing. On the call today, we also, actually, let me just step back. Again, just to refresh, last hearing, we presented testimony from Pastor James Evans. This is really his vision that we're here on tonight. He's had this vision and this hope for a number of years that he could add this component of affordable senior housing to his the mission of his church, his mission and his church's mission in Bristol Township. He testified last time. We also had Mr. Bruce Morgan testify, who's one of the principals in BCM Affordable Housing, again, who's one of the 2 developers. We also had Mr. Mike Donovan, who's our architect. He's a principal with Haley Donovan Architects.
Hello.
Given the short time frame, we were not able to complete the hearing the last time. So tonight we're going to present testimony from Mr. Greg Elko. He is a civil engineer and he's the managing principal of Langen Engineering. And we also have a professional land planner, Elizabeth Rogan, who will also be testifying this evening. What I'd like to do is, again, I'd like to share my screen. We've submitted exhibits, both in hard copies, and I had submitted them to Mr. Scott this morning by electronically. I'd like to just walk you through the exhibits that we have to just to give you a sense for where we are, what we did last time, what we're going to do tonight. So if I could share my screen, I can start to do that. And I have 2 separate packets I'd like to. All right, is anyone seeing my screen? I'm not sure.
Yes, I can see it.
Is it coming up?
Yes.
Okay. What you should be seeing is the hearing binder index from February 8th, 2021. What you're seeing? Because again, for some reason, it's not showing up on my, I'm not sure what you're seeing here.
We see it, Bruce, Bill.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, so this is the exhibits. From the last time we had the proof of ownership, which was a title report confirming that the church owns the properties. We had Exhibit 2A, the application from December 11th, 2020. We had a letter requesting an amendment to the application dated January 7th of 2021. And then Exhibit 2C was the relief requested list. Tab 3, we had photos. There were photos of the posting and then photos of the property, which I'll run through shortly. Just again, to give you a refresher on what the property looks like. We had at Exhibit 4, the notice letters, mailing lists, mailing receipts, and confirmation, which confirms that we provide notice to the required neighbors of the application. Exhibit 5, we have an area plan, an area map, a zoning map, and an aerial photo. At Exhibit 6, we have a survey of the property. Exhibit 7A is a proposed building elevation and a proposed sign elevation. Now those are, and Exhibit 8, we have Exhibit A through F, we have floor plans. I think we'll walk through those in a couple of minutes. And then what we're going to get to tonight as new exhibits will be the original zoning plan at tab 9, a revised zoning plan, which was submitted in early January, January 5th to be precise. At Exhibit 10, we have, again, the relief requested plan, which is somewhat duplicative of the earlier exhibit which lists the relief. And then we have at Exhibit 12, we have a parking revision sketch, which is some revisions that we made to the parking based on our second meeting with the Township Council, excuse me. Project team qualifications at Exhibit 13, we have Mr. Morgan's qualifications, Greg Elko's, Mr. Donovan's. At Exhibit D, the qualifications for Ingerman. We have support letters at Exhibit 14. 14A is Congressman Fitzpatrick. We have a support letter from the church, and it's no longer bound training and prevention nonprofit. We also have a support letter from Ms. Martha Miller, who's a neighborhood resident. At tab 15, we have some documents out of the comprehensive plan. We have a comprehensive plan map at special study areas map 15B. And then 2 sections out of the comprehensive plan relating to residential and infill development and special studies areas at 15C and D. Now I'd like to have another screen I would just like to share because there are 3 supplemental exhibits. If I can locate them here. They were here a minute ago. These were submitted to Mr. Scott this morning. Okay, are you seeing a document which says supplemental hearing binder index now on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Now these are, again, just 3 additional exhibits. The project team qualifications for Elizabeth Rogan. We have a support letter from Gordon's Auto Body, which is immediately next door. And we have another support letter from Congressman Fitzpatrick, dated February 25th. Now, this is a letter that the congressman actually sent to the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency. There is an application deadline, as we'd indicated, coming up later this week. And the congressman sent this letter to PHFA and indicating his support for this project and for the financing of this project. And those exhibits are, I'll just show those to you briefly. This is Ms. Rogan's resume. We'll go through that a little later. We have a letter from Gordon's Auto Body indicating that his property is adjacent. He has 14 separate lots with his auto repair shop. And Esther's been his neighbor for 20 years, and that he supports the project because there's a need for more affordable housing in the township. So I'll minimize that and go back to my other. Okay, now you should be seeing the full packet. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. I'm just going to scroll through most of it again. First, we have the title report.
I'm sorry, what report are you referring to?
The title report is Exhibit 1.
Thank you.
Okay. This is not the easiest way to do this. Exhibit 2, we have our application, including the materials in the application. This is exhibit. This is exhibit 2C with the list of the relief requested. This is really slow tonight for some reason. And here are the photos. These are the posting photos. Okay, now I'm getting to where I wanted to be. Okay, so this is exhibit 3B1. This is the photo of the church property, the main church property from Norton Avenue. This is Norton Avenue. In the foreground, the left here, we have Elwood. This is the main church building where services are held. And this is an adjoining building where other some affiliated church activities occur. This building here will actually be demolished as part of this application, if it's approved. 3B2 is another view of the church, almost from the same perspective. This is the front of the church. This is the building to be demolished. What we've done here is we've just shown you what's across the street. This is one of the two parcels that are part of the application on which parking would be provided. Another photo, a more close-up view of the front, again, church. This is the driveway to the church. This is the building that would be demolished. Now, this is a view from Watson. Here to the right is Watson. Norton is to the left of the screen now. So this is the front of the church, right in this area. This is the accessory building which we demolished, and the front of the affordable housing would basically go on Watson in this area here. This is a view looking down Watson. Again, this is the front of the accessory building which we demolished. And then across Watson on the right-hand side of the photo, there are some buildings which would be demolished as part of the parking. So this would be main parking parcel, would be the other parking parcel which we referred to earlier across Norton. And again, the front of the affordable housing, we extend down Watson, and then there would be an L shape that goes off behind the main church building. This is exhibit 3B7, Roman numeral 7. This is essentially the same view from the same perspective, but it shows the two buildings across Watson, which would be demoed, and this would be the area where the accessory parking lot would be located. This is what we've done here is we've gone down Watson and we're looking back up towards Norton. This is the main church building here on the right. This is the main church parking lot. Again, the affordable housing property, the affordable housing building would be located along Watson. And again, then the two properties that would be demolished at the far end of Watson towards Norton for the parking. And then the next photo, we just take you a little bit further down Watson. Trying to find a way to speed this up, but it's not really doing anything to help. This is, again, this is a little further down Watson, looking back up towards the church. Again, the back of the church, the church parking lot, Watson. Here to the left So unfortunately, this photo did not get flipped. So you have to turn your head a little bit. But again, this is just a little further down Watson, looking back up the church parking lot here to the right, and then the buildings that are going to be demolished to the left. All right, for some reason it jumped back. And then this is further down Watson. What you see is just a lot of wooded area and so a couple of residences to the left on Watson. All right, then what we have, we've jumped to the other side of the church. The church gone back Norton to Elwood. And what we're looking at here is a view of the back of the church parking lot. The church is actually off to the right here, this view. And for the court reporter, this is Exhibit 3B 12. Church is to the right. This is the church parking lot. This is a church vehicle. And then what you see is adjacent to the church to the rear is the auto body, the Gordon's Auto Body establishment. So this is what you see, again, looking down Elwood. The left here, across Elwood, is the rear of a commercial property that fronts on Route 13, Bristol Pike. We recall we referenced last time that there's actually a gun range that's housed in that building. It looks like there's a number of other retail type uses housed in that building as well. And we have two more photos, I believe. This is another photo from Elwood. This is looking almost directly front on the auto body building. And the auto body property owns all the remainder of this vacant land. And you can see, if you look, this is the rear of the church parking lot with that van, which was located on the parking lot in the prior photo. And then Exhibit 3B 14 is the last of our photos. And this is a view all the way down Elwood, looking back Elwood. So you can see the wooded area, which is the rear of the commercial property on Route 13. We've got the auto body, and then the church is all the way down here at the end. So that's the photos. Then we have, these are the property. Let me just go back and get the exhibit number on this. This is always easier when you have hard copies in front of you. 9A, or excuse me, 4A. We have our notice letters. The entire Exhibit 4 are notice letters and documents related. I'm going to jump through those because we saw them last time. And then we get to Exhibit 5A. This is a tax map plan. Basically shows the various tax parcels in the area, including the main church parcel on Norton. This is Norton. This is Elwood, Norton, Watson. So this is the main church parcel. This is the smaller of the parking parcels that's proposed. And this is the larger of the parking parcels across Watson. The auto body that we just looked at is this parcel. Again, it's the main auto body building with 14 much smaller parcels. Then we have the commercial building fronting on Route 13. Rear of the property, again, is all wooded. And somewhere in here is the gun range. Actually, just a couple other things I wanted to point out. There's a electric substation in this location. To the right of the property, about a block away. And then also we have the connector from the turnpike to Route 113 coming over here, a little more than a block away from the church parcel. The church parcel is visible from this connector, and the connector is visible from the church parcel this time of year when the leaves are off of the trees. Then we have a Exhibit 5B is a Google map, which just illustrates some of the other uses that are in the property. Again, the relationship, this is Route 13. This is the commercial property with the gun range. The church is right in here. Then this is the turnpike connector back to the turnpike from Route 13. And this is where the actual turnpike crosses Route 13. There's a hotel right in this location, which when you're out there driving, it's just really around the corner from the church. We have the existing zoning map. Again, the site is right in this area. It's currently zoned R3, as is the entire commercial parcel with the gun range on Route 13, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. There is some commercial zoning around it. There's a municipal parcel not too far away. And one of the issues we're going to point out this evening is that the existing zoning doesn't necessarily comport with what's on the ground. There's some inconsistencies, and there's also inconsistencies between the zoning and what the township has as the comprehensive plan in the future of this property. We have Exhibit 5B, which is another Google map, which is an aerial and showing some of, this is a lot of the heavier uses across Route 13. We have the commercial building, sizable commercial building across Elwood, the wooded site, our church parcel, and the auto body, and again, then the connector back to Route 13. Exhibit 6 is just an exhibit showing the tax parcels. This really jumps around. Exhibit 7, and I apologize, this did not get turned either. This is the front elevation of the church building. You should have that in your packets. Exhibit 7A. Exhibit 7B is the signage, the monument sign, which Mr. Donovan went over last time, describing that the signage, monument signage. And we have the floor plans. It's the first floor, which includes a number of one-bedroom units. There's a community room. There's an arts and craft room, a trash room. Again, the units, there's an office, a fitness center, community room, medical suite, and then there's an elevator in this area as well. And then we have the similar floor plans for the second, third, and fourth floor. I'm just going to stop here if I can. Yeah, similar exhibits. This is Exhibit 8B, which shows the floor plan. There's a couple of two-bedroom units on this floor. And also, each of these diagrams gives you just a volume calculation for the space on each floor. We have the same at Exhibit 8C for the third floor and the fourth floor. And we have Exhibit 8D and E. We have the typical floor plan for the one-bedroom unit. You see it's got a living, dining area, kitchen, laundry, bath, and this is the bedroom area with a small deck. And then the next Exhibit 8E will be a typical two-bedroom unit. The one-bedroom unit, I forgot to mention, is about 656, I believe, square feet. The two-bedroom unit is a little larger. It's about 1,099 square feet. And here you have a bedroom, a second bedroom, a larger bedroom. You have a laundry, bath area with mechanicals, a kitchen, then a living and dining area. Okay, then that brings us to Exhibit 9, which is where we're going to start with Mr. Elko. Before I do that, I think at the last hearing, I neglected to have our architect, Mr. Donovan, qualified as an expert. Now, we had, as I noted earlier, we've included his resume in the packet, and I would, we did ask him some questions as to his his experience. So I'd like the board to just acknowledge whether they consider Mr. Donovan to be an architect, an expert architect, before we commence with Mr. Elko.
He's acknowledged.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, I'd like to call Greg Elko.
Mr. Elko, could you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Elko.
Good evening.
All right, you've been here the entire hearing this evening, correct?
Yes,
And you've heard my statements?
I have.
And did I accurately state everything that you're familiar with?
Yes.
Okay, and you adopt anything that's relevant to the engineering as your own testimony?
Yes.
Okay. Now, by whom are you employed?
Langen Engineering and Environmental Services.
Okay, are you a managing principal of Lang?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and your offices are in Warrington, correct?
They are. Yeah. The address is 2700 Kelly Road.
Okay, and you're a civil engineer, correct?
Yes.
And what are your responsibilities at Langen?
I have various responsibilities, including the management of the site civil group in our Warrington office.
Okay, and you have you're a licensed professional engineer in Pennsylvania, correct?
Yes.
And you have what degrees do you have in civil engineering?
I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, both from Rutgers College of Engineering.
Okay, and how many years of experience do you have as a civil engineer?
Over 27 years.
Okay, and you provided me with your resume, which we've included at Exhibit 13B this evening, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'd like to ask that the board recognize Mr. Langwin as a professional or as an expert civil engineer.
Mr.
So
Elko.
recognized. I've reviewed his CV and he qualifies.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Langwin, what's your role in this proposal?
I'm the civil engineer that basically had responsibility preparing the various documents that were submitted, including the zoning plans and supportive information.
Okay. What I'd like you to do now is just walk us through the exhibits. I'll scroll through them. You indicate which one you want me to pull up, and just describe for the board what this proposal is, what the existing conditions are first, and then what we're proposing.
Sure. Bill, would it be easier for me to share my screen? I have the exhibits queued up, and I could point them out with the arrow and things.
Yes, is that possible, Mr. Scott?
If not, then we can just do it
Yeah,
this way.
everybody can share their screen, yeah.
Let me give it a shot, Bill.
Okay, go ahead. I'm going to minimize mine, see if you can get yours up.
I think you have to stop sharing.
I'll be able to see it.
Mr. Elko, it's Ken Fetterman. Could you sort of give the board an explanation based on your professional opinion as to the variances requested? Because really we understand, I think the board understands the project. There's an awful lot of variances here, and many of them are not de minimis. In fact, most aren't. And I think it's that part of your expertise that I think the board would rely upon in rendering a decision.
I appreciate that, absolutely.
I haven't heard much about hardship through all this, so explain to the board why these variances are needed and why, for example, a zoning classification change may not have eliminated some of the requested variances.
I appreciate that, Mr. Fetterman. I'm going to get into the detail of that through my presentation.
And Mr. Greg, before you start, Mr. Fetterman, one of the things I wanted to point out sort of as laying groundwork for that is that we are requesting a number of variances, and where basically the hardship that we're asserting is the fact that we have a church that we're proposing to create this accessory adjunct use with, and the church has limited space available on its parcel. So that's one part of the hardship. The other part is that it has 3 parcels which are segregated. If it was one large parcel, the variances that we would need would be more minimal. It's hard to tell exactly what would be required and what we could eliminate, but Mr. Elko will testify that the variances would be more minimal if in fact we didn't have the parcel split by the roadway. But the third part of this is really
Well, just on that point, I think it would be important to understand whether those parcels are useful as they exist. And if not, why not?
okay.
Because if they're
We'll go-
developable, theoretically, you don't need relief. But if they're not developable, maybe that's a basis for the relief you're seeking.
Okay, yeah, and part of that is that they are parcels that are owned by the church. And the parcel across Norton, you saw it was wooded. It has, some improvements there, but mostly it's wooded. And to make use of that, the most logical use of that would be parking, which is what we're proposing. The buildings across Watson, the parcels across Watson, they're currently being used by the daycare, I believe, is in one of them. And the no longer bound nonprofit is in another, but we're going to relocate those. And again, a logical use for those combined parcels is as parking for the church. So that's all part of our hardship. But the other piece of this that I wanted to point out is that part of the reason we're here is because of this application process that we have to go through with the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency. We started this process back in late summer of last year. And we had a discussion with the council president and some discussions with the township staff. And at that point, it was decided that the most expeditious path forward, given the time crunch that we had, because we have this deadline application approaching in March, was to go the zoning variance route as opposed to looking for a zoning change, zoning
Well,
amendment.
okay, but
zoning
you can
overlay.
appreciate that our board bases its decisions on requests for variances or other matters addressed by the code. So regardless of what's most expeditious, there needs to be justification for it.
No, I understand, and I think we have some, and we're hoping that the board has an open mind and a broad view. There's a legal principle out there that where there are questions that the interpretation most favorable to the applicant should be applied. So we're hoping that the board takes that approach this evening. Again, we do, the last piece of this is we do have support from the council, and theoretically, if the variances were not to be granted, we could go back to the council and work with them to have the ordinance amended. However, that would not allow us to make application this year. And if we don't make the application this year by the end of the week, we're looking at losing an entire year on this project.
Right, we can appreciate it, believe me.
Yeah,
But
and I think
we're
that-
independent, but we're independent of the council, so.
No, I understand. I think that if there were some conditions placed on, well, I'd have to think about that. But if certain zoning changes were viewed as something that would help the board grant the variances, I think that as conditions, I think we could that would be something we could talk about. But
Okay,
I understand your
Please.
dilemma, and I think you
Yeah.
understand our dilemma. So thank you.
Yeah, please proceed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr.
Bill, can you
Kerr,
stop presenting?
Sure. If Mr. Elko is going to share the screen, you got to stop sharing yours.
Oh, yeah, okay, hold on. Let's get to that. I'm just not sure where it went.
It's a green button in the middle lower area, and it says share screen.
And for some reason, I'm not seeing. All
Yeah,
I'm seeing.
Bill, go to the top. It may say stop sharing if you hover your mouse to the top.
For some reason, all I have is the little box that has oh wait, maybe this will help. A little box that has the various photos in it. I'm not sure how to get back to the.
If you hit your unphoto and right click it,
Yeah, that may do it, and then do stop sharing.
I apologize. This is just not, got rid of my photo. There's just no, I'm not getting any kind of ability to stop. Mr. Scott, can you just eliminate my ability to stop sharing? That may do the same thing because it's just not giving me that option here.
See, Bill, I could see it on the screen. I just saw it there. It said stop share in the middle of the screen in red at the top. Hover your mouse to the top. There you go.
Okay, I'm not sure what that did, but I see it. So hold on a second.
You guys should be seeing my screen now.
Okay, does that work? Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that.
All right. So this is Exhibit 6 in the package. This is the survey that our firm prepared for the site. I'll refer to this for this first part of the testimony. What I want to do is just walk through the existing conditions here. And I know Bill did a good job of showing you the photos, but I want to walk through the survey because a lot of the existing conditions are relevant for the variances, and I want to make sure that I point them out. So the site address is 1150 Norton Avenue. There are 13 separate parcels that comprise the overall project site. They're tax parcels 5-065, and they're lots 16, 17, 18, 19, 27, 28, 29, 32, 33, 37, 38, 79, and 80. And I walk through those just to give you the, sort of scope of what we're dealing with. These are small lots. It's very indicative of this neighborhood. The lots individually, some of them are 50 feet wide, some of them are less than 50 feet wide, they're 20 feet wide. They're really not developable on their own. They're sort of what I would call substandard, subdevelopable lots. The total area of those 13 parcels is 1.36 acres. And you could see that the streets sort of bisect the overall property into 3 distinct parcels, I'll call them. So here's Elwood at the bottom, Elwood Avenue. We have Norton Avenue going up and down on the plan. And then we have Watson Avenue going left to right in the middle of the plan. And what that does is it creates these 3 separate parcels. I'll call Parcel One is essentially the lot that's bounded by Watson to the north, Norton to the east, and Elwood to the south. That's the lot that has the existing church building. That's this rectangular shape in the middle here. It has the parking lot for the church that's to the south of the building, behind it, and then to the north, and then the ancillary building that's immediately to the north of the church. The second parcel has the current daycare facility on it. It is comprised of a series of buildings. You can see that property here is bounded by Norton to the east and Watson to the south. Right? It's a little difficult to see, but the solid lines on this plan are the property lines. So Watson Avenue has this right-of-way that goes from the solid property line south on Parcel 2 to the northern property line on Parcel 1. It's a wide right-of-way. I'm going to zoom in. It's a 50-foot wide right-of-way. So that's Parcel 2. Parcel 3 is this parcel that's to the east of Norton and to the north of Elwood. It's a narrow shaped lot. The 3 parcels together, Parcel 1 is roughly 0.8 acres. Parcel 2 is 0.4 acres, and Parcel 3 is 0.15 acres. So these are small lots. The existing streets are, there are existing conditions that constrain and shape the lot sizes that are here. There are public utilities. For what it's worth, I want to mention there's public utilities here that service these properties.
Hey, move your feet. Move your feet. Move your feet.
Sorry, we're getting some feedback. In terms of just other things to point out, there are no areas of wetlands, floodplains, streams, or waters of the Commonwealth within the property limits or within 100 feet of the property limits. And there's no areas of woodlands or steep slopes or floodplain soils, lakes, ponds, or shores within the subject property. Those are relevant because there's site capacity calculations that we performed that rely upon either the presence or absence of those features. As Mr. Kerr said, the site is zoned in the R3 residential district, as is the surrounding properties. And just to step outside a little bit of what is here, to the south of this site is a wooded area, and it's on property that contains the warehouse slash retail use. To the southwest is Gordon's Auto Body. That building exists here on the to the left-hand side of the church. There's undeveloped property owned by Gordon's Auto Body along Watson Avenue, which is also to the west of the church property. And then to the northwest, to the north, to the northeast, and to the east are all single-family residential areas and properties for the most part. What I'm going to do now is switch to Exhibit 9, and these are the proposed conditions that were submitted in December, and Exhibit 10, which is the revised plan. And this is the one that I want to present tonight. The reason why I wanted to show Exhibit 9 was because the previous application included a daycare facility on Parcel 2, which was subsequently removed in favor of a parking lot here. As we had testified earlier, the application was revised to include more parking as a result of some feedback we received from council. So the project is a 56-unit, 4-story apartment building. It's senior, what we're calling senior housing, affordable multifamily. The existing church to remain is in what I'll call the nook of the building. There's a 11 car.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Cindy.
Okay, I'm getting a lot of people speaking at the same time for some reason, so I'm not getting all the testimony. The existing church remains what I would call
in the nook of the proposed apartment building. There's a 11-car parking lot proposed on Lot 1. Across the street from Norton, there's another 11-car parking lot proposed on Parcel 3. And on Parcel 2, there's a 30-car parking lot that's proposed. And these parking lots will serve the apartment building and the church. And I'll get into parking in just a moment. On-site improvements are going to include landscaping, lighting, drainage, and utility improvements. I want to point out street improvements that will come with the project. We are proposing curbing and sidewalks along all of the frontages for all 3 parcels. That'll be a nice amenity that is added and will be part of this project. And then we had showed previous testimony by Mr. Donovan, a monument sign proposed facing Norton Avenue on the northeast side of Parcel 1. So that's the project. And I will now get into the variances. I just wanted to lay the groundwork of the existing conditions because they are relevant. And I'm going to group the variances generally into 3 broad categories. The first variance category is really area and bulk variances that are related to the development of the property. The second variance is the parking variance. And the third variance is the signage variance. And the signage variance was already testified to by Mr. Donovan in the last hearing. So my testimony is really going to focus on the area and bulk variances for this project and the parking as well. And I would say that just in general, a point to make that underscores the need for many of the variances that this is an established neighborhood. The existing properties are very small in nature, as I pointed out with the existing 13 properties for the site. And infill development is really the only option for development in this area. And by infill, I mean projects that don't quite fit. You can't avoid violating the zoning variance in order to fit them. And it's also important to point out, as I did, that the 3 streets, these existing streets, which are existing conditions, they obviously can't be moved. They do represent a significant hardship on the project because they carved the property into these 3 smaller parcels. And I would submit to you that without the presence of those 3 streets and the rights of way, the variance list would be smaller. I wouldn't suggest that it would be eliminated, but those 3 streets do provide some significant encroachments into the property and really fix a lot of the property lines that can't be moved. Furthermore, the existing church to remain is also an existing condition. The church is going to remain intact. The church, as I said, is located in what I call the nook of the apartment building here. And really the church and its fixed location more or less determines the only places where the apartment building can be placed. You can only put the apartment building on the remaining lands around the church, which is to the north, to the west of the church, and a little bit to the south as well. And again, as Mr. Kerr pointed out, we need to view this project, the apartment building, as an ancillary and supportive use to the church and its mission as testified by Pastor Evans. So what I'll do, the best way to do this is to step through each individual parcel and talk about the relief. So I'll start with Parcel One. Parcel One is the property where the church is going to remain and the apartment building will be built if approved. And you can see here, as I've said, Watson Avenue, Norton Avenue, and Elwood Avenue all affix the location of this property so that the property lines are where they are. And they basically limit the size of the property to a 200-foot wide at its longest point property between Watson and Elwood. You can also see that there's an L shape here, which is a unique condition. There's a jog in the property line that is behind the building to the west side of the proposed building. And that's a unique condition as well. And really the presence of the church, the size of the property, the limitations placed by the roads that are here, they really limit the development of the property, and there's not much more you can do with regard to the placement of the project. Now, some supportive reasons that I have, in my opinion, about these particular variances, and they really carry to the 3 parcels, but let me talk about Parcel One first, is generally there's strong neighborhood support for this project. Furthermore, to the south, there are no residences. There's really nothing to be impacted to the south of this property. It's a wooded lot. It's a lot that has a retail and a warehousing component. To the west of this site is Gordon's Auto Body. There's no residence on that side. There's a support letter from Gordon's Auto Body in the package that you saw there, so there's no impact to any property to the west. To the north of this site is a parking lot that's part of the project. So as it relates to this parcel, that's not an impact. Now I will acknowledge that there are single family uses that are to the northwest along Watson Avenue, and the presence of a 4-story building will provide some visual impact to those residences. But if you noticed in the photographs that Bill walked through earlier, there's a fair amount of mature trees that are along that road, and they will provide some screening to those residents that are there. But nevertheless, there will be some impacts to those neighbors. Again, I think the strong support by the neighbors of this project, combined with the presence of those mature trees to help mitigate some of the impacts, will help support the project. And then to finish out, sort of rounding it out, to the east of Parcel One, we have our parking lot, which is part of our own project. And then further to the east of that, there is the substation, which is a industrial use, would not be impacted by this project. There are residential residential lots across from Norton Avenue. They will be impacted from a visual standpoint. Again, strong neighborhood support for the project. And so we feel that the impacts would be minimal. To speak to the setback requirements, that we need setbacks from the various buffers and from the front yard setbacks, et cetera. The project is going to be designed in accordance with the applicable building and fire code requirements. That's mandatory in Pennsylvania. They will adhere to the requirements for the building and fire code as it relates to access, fire suppression, et cetera. And, you know, the applicant will work with township officials, including the fire marshal and the building code through the land development process. Whatever details are needed to iron out those issues will get worked through, and the building will be designed to accommodate that. What I'd like to talk about now is the parking relief. It's part of Parcel One. It obviously affects Parcels 2 and 3 because there's parking located on those properties as well. So we need a special exception to reduce the number of required parking spaces in these common parking lots. These parking lots are shared, so they're what I call, and what the code calls, common parking lots. And we do need a variance from the number of parking spaces. And I'd like to walk through this with you. It's relevant to, so you can see the magnitude of parking that your ordinance would otherwise require as compared to what the actual needs are of this facility. So looking at your ordinance, if I look at the church use, a place of worship is based on seats, it's based on the number of employees, it's based on floor area, etc. When I go through the calculation, I come up with the church needing 132 parking spaces. When I look at the apartment, the senior affordable multifamily housing, that requirement is based on spaces per unit, spaces for visitors, spaces for staff. That requirement alone is 168 parking spaces. Adding the two numbers together, 132 plus 168, by ordinance, this project would require 300 parking spaces, which is significantly more than what would ever be needed for this project. And it's my opinion, and I'll show you with the calculations which were submitted to the town, that the needs are much, much lower. So when we talk about the actual spaces that would be needed for the church, we look at what the largest number of spaces would ever be utilized for any service that would occur in the church. And that's any time during the year, that's seasonal, holiday related, weddings, banquets, etc., you name it. We talked to Pastor Evans. So accommodating the largest use, the largest event, along with the number of full-time employees that would ever be utilized by the church, the total peak parking demand for the church is 45 spaces. When we look at the apartment building and talking with the applicant, the peak parking demand for any facility that's of their facilities that has this type of use is 20% of what the total number of units would be. With that, we add spaces for each full-time and each part-time staff on the largest shift. We add spaces for visitors, 5 spaces for visitors during peak visitation times. We come up with a total of 22 spaces needed based on that actual demand. And when I add the 22 spaces to the 45 spaces, this project will need only 67 spaces on the peak parking period at any point during the year. Now, the project provides 67 spaces. There's 11 spaces on lot 1. There's 30 spaces on lot 2. There are 11 spaces on lot 3. That's a total of 52 on lot spaces. In addition to that, the project will be able to carve out another 15 parking spaces on the street in front of Watson, Norton, and Elwood Avenue. And that's how we get our 67. Now, it's my opinion that these calculations are extremely conservative. The peak parking demand will only be experienced once or twice a year at the most. It's based on actual demand for these individual uses. The parking demand, the 67 spaces, assumes the worst case scenario that the peak parking times would occur at the same time for the church and the apartment building, which is very unlikely, but we want to plan for the worst case scenario. And I'll point out that beyond the 15 parking spaces, there's more street parking, much more street parking available beyond these site frontages. So if I continue down Watson, if I continue down Elwood, if I continue north along Norton, people can continue to park along the street. So there's much more parking that's available beyond the 67 spaces. So what I'll do now is I'll move to parcel 2. In addition to the parking variance that's combined with what I just talked about, parcel 2 also needs a variance for impervious surfaces and buffer yards. And again, we have a fixed location of Watson Avenue and Norton Avenue. You can see parcel 2 is somewhat narrow in shape. It's actually resulting in somewhat of a non-traditional parking layout here. And again, the location in proximity to the apartment building lends itself to being developed as a parking lot based on the input we received from council to provide more parking and remove the daycare center. Similarly, for parcel 3, it's essentially similar variances for impervious surface. Parcel 3 is this 0.11 acre parcel. You could see it's very narrow in shape. A further existing concern is that the cartway of Elwood Avenue and Norton Avenue actually encroaches into the property. So part of the street lies within the property of parcel 2. And so because of that narrow shape, because of the encroachment, you can see here, there's really not much you can do more than provide some ancillary parking for the church. And that really is the need for the different variances here. So with that, that summarizes my walkthrough of the project. At this point, what I wanted to do, Bill, is just sort of make mention of the comprehensive plan. I know our planner is going to talk more about it in detail. But what I want to point out is that this location is located in what's called a residential opportunity neighborhood. The comprehensive plan points out that this a residential opportunity neighborhood is one where new developments should be navigated to. Infill development occurs generally on empty parcels, but within developed areas, and that the infill development can be residential, and residential developments would support the township's need to further supply the housing stock for senior family development. So I wanted to point that out. I know our planner will go into much more testimony related to that, but it's an observation that I made in my research for this project. Bill, I can then just go through, finish up my testimony with the justification standards per the ordinance section.
Okay, if you want to do that, go ahead, and I'll jump in if I want clarification on anything. So go ahead.
All right, sure. So your ordinance section 205-186C2 provides standards for justification and relief. And I believe that I've presented the evidence to identify and support each one of these items. So those sections talk to whether the granting of the variances will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the chapter and will not be injurious to the neighborhood.
I'm getting a lot of feedback. Can you stop for a second?
Yes.
I'm getting some feedback here. So let's pick up where the last sentence you just said.
Yeah, if someone's not talking, they should just mute their phone.
Yes, please.
All right, so for clarity purposes, let me start from the top. The justification for the variances in section 205-186C provides requirements for variance justifications to be considered by the zoning hearing board. So the applicant needs to prove that variances won't be contrary to the public interest, that practical difficulty and unnecessary hardship would result if not granted, and that whether or not the variances would be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the chapter and would not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare. It's my strong opinion that was supported by my testimony and the testimony of the prior experts that approval of the variances won't be injurious to the neighborhood. They will allow for the project that will enhance and improve the neighborhood and won't be detrimental to the public welfare. The proposed uses are permitted by right in the zoning district. There's a requirement that the zoning board needs to consider whether or not if the variances will will permit the establishment of a zoning district and any use that's not permitted. So the use is being permitted by right in the zoning district supports that justification. I believe that the project is a reasonable use of this property in this neighborhood. I think that the special circumstances and unique site conditions that I testified to, namely the presence of the existing roads, the rights of way associated with those roads, the narrowness and unique shapes and sizes and locations of the properties, the fact that there are 13 existing undevelopable lots that exist here, and the church that will remain all support those unique characteristics. I believe that these characteristics do create a hardship for the applicant. And my testimony, I believe, does support that the hardship, it's not associated with any profit motive or self-created. It's based on existing conditions. If the ordinance was strictly applied, it would prevent the reasonable use of the project. Again, especially considering the church's mission that was previously testified to. I believe that the granting of the variances is necessary for the reasonable use of the land and the building if granted by the zoning hearing board, and that they are the minimum that would accomplish the purposes that we've presented to you tonight and during the last hearing. The special exception that we are requesting applies to the parking and the 3 parcels, and I've provided the support, in my opinion, for those requirements as it relates to the parking for the special exception standards. And again, it's my opinion that the evidence that I supplied provides justification for those standards. So that's concludes my justification. I do want to point out that we did receive several review letters from Township consultants. We received a review letter from Gilmore and Associates dated January 13th, 2021. I reviewed that letter. The letter is generally applicable to the land development process of the project. It was a very thorough review. Most of the items in the letter will be items that will be addressed during land development, such as storm drainage, design items, utilities, things of that nature. I did receive also a review letter from Pannoni dated January 18th, 2021. This letter also is a will comply. I'd like to point out specifically that there were 2 comments related to parking in that letter, and it's worthy because I mentioned parking in my testimony. Mr. Johnston supported, or I'm sorry, shared some comments regarding parking along Elwood Avenue that could be improved from a site access condition. So what I did here, shown in red, is the plan that we intend to revise should the project get approved. What this is, it shows some striping improvements that align the traffic better on eastbound Elwood Avenue so that they are aligned to the eastbound continuation of Elwood Avenue as you go further to the east of the site. This requires the removal of some parking spaces here. You can see here 5 spaces get removed. However, there was some additional suggestion that we reconfigure the parking on Parcel 2 so that we can provide a better parking arrangement and perhaps more parking. So what we're proposing here is the removal of these parallel spaces, but moving them more appropriately to the other side where cars are actually better aligned to safer park. And then we have the ability to add parking spaces along Watson Avenue as well. These changes result actually in a net +1 parking for the site. That'll give us a little bit of wiggle room in case we need to lose 1 parking space as a result of design efforts, but we will maintain the minimum 67 spaces that I testified to. And none of these changes will affect any of the variances other than the parking. And again, that should be it shouldn't affect the 67 as well. Finally, we did receive a review letter from the Township Fire Marshal dated January 7th. Again, those comments were really more related to the design of the building and fire access, and the applicant will work through the land development process with the Fire Marshal to address those comments, as I've testified to as well. And that brings my presentation to a close. Bill?
I have a housekeeping question. The application was amended on January 7th, 2021 by you, by your correspondence, Mr. Elko. You agree with that?
That's correct.
All right. So effectively that you would agree that's the date of the application
Yes.
to the zoning hearing board?
Yes.
Not the date in December when it was originally submitted.
You are correct. The original submission was December, as you pointed out. We amended the application with the new plan, which is shown on Exhibit 10 on January 7th. You are correct.
All right. So you would agree that the conduct of the hearing, and I'll put this to council as well, is based upon a January 7th date in terms of the timeliness of this hearing?
Yes.
Because we board wouldn't really know what they're granting relief for without a finalized application. You agree with that?
Yes, the January 7th dated documents were all the latest that were submitted. That's correct.
Thank you.
Does
Bill,
anybody,
you're muted.
does anybody on the board have any questions for Mr. Elko?
If I could just clarify something, we're not contesting the timeliness of the hearing. The first hearing was held on February the 8th. This is a continuation of that hearing, so we have no reason to contest the timeliness of the hearing based on the January 5th or the December 11th application date. So-
Right. I just want to be clear for the
Yeah,
record because
I
I'm not
get you.
sure that was put on the record last
Right,
time.
okay.
I'd like to make one clarification, if I may, regarding that.
Sure.
When we received the, I believe it was the Gilmore Associates letter, they actually pointed out several additional variances based on their review that needed to be added, and actually a few that needed to be taken out that were, were not relevant or not applicable. So our variance list in the application materials that you see before you here was amended a few days after the 7th to reflect those more current variance list. And I believe that's what was advertised for, and that's what was noticed for, and that's what was included in all the subsequent documents.
Yep. Fair enough. So noted.
Does anybody from the board have any questions for Mr. Elko?
Can I just have Mr. Elko just clarify a couple points?
Yes, hold on. Let me see if anybody has any questions, please.
Okay.
Anybody from the board? I have a question about the fire marshal's report. So, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes here because I know there was some concerns about, fire access and all that stuff. But so a building of this size and this scope, it doesn't need any kind of fire lanes or anything like that. Like you're shortening up the parking spots and the parking lots, and I don't see where possibly it could be a problem for fire trucks to get into or anything like that. Mr. Elko, can you speak to that or no?
Well, I could partially speak to it just from a site access perspective. The access to this building will be much more safer and appropriate from the public roads, as opposed to a small, tight parking lot. So the way we've designed it, access to the building for fire purposes can be made from Watson Avenue or from Elwood Avenue. Those are the two closest approaches to the building on either side. And my understanding is that there's water, public water system and fire hydrants in this neighborhood, which the fire company can access. But you can see we're not proposing parking along Elwood Avenue on the side of the building facing Elwood Avenue or on the side of the building facing Watson. We do have a drop-off zone that might be temporarily occupied by a vehicle, but if there's a fire in the building, no vehicle will reasonably be there, and that slot can be used for a fire truck as well. So from a site perspective and access perspective, it's my opinion that, they can get to the building if need be.
All right, thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
On that fire marshal review and those fire issues, our architect, Mr. Donovan, has had some follow-up exchanges, I believe, with the fire marshal for the township. And I think he could come back and testify as to what those were and what the conclusion of the fire marshal's additional review was since the last hearing, if that's something that the board was interested in.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want me to speak to that at all, or?
Sure, go ahead.
So typically
Mike,
a building.
Mike, just state your full name for the record again.
Michael Robert Donovan, Haley Donovan, principal.
And you were sworn at the last hearing on February the 8th, correct?
Correct.
And you're still testifying under oath, correct?
Correct.
Go ahead.
So a building of this size is calculated by the open perimeter, and we are properly sized per the IBC. And while egress windows would not be required in the bedrooms, because it's a fully sprinklered building, we are going to be providing them. That was one of the things we spoke to the fire marshal about. And then another thing is the standpipe in the stairways wouldn't be required in a building this size, but we are going to be providing that. That allows firefighters to fight from the stairways. They could hook their hoses directly to the stairway hoses and fight a fire there. And there was a fence we're going to take down to be able to fight the fire better from the rear. And so the rear back area where there's a fence, that property setback meets, correct, Greg? That's
Yes.
a 7.5 feet. So
6 feet.
yeah. So realistically, by zoning, we could have another building that's 6 feet away. So have 12 feet for access. So, and the existing building that's going to come down is closer to the church than our building's proposed. It's a couple feet further away, and there's going to be access through there. So I just wanted to put on record that we have spoke. We're working through some things with them, and we're going to continue to work with them.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Donovan?
I would just, again, like to have him clarify just a couple points when all the other questions are done.
Okay, you can clarify what you have to clarify. If we have any other questions, we'll come back to him.
Okay. Okay, so Mr. Donovan, the use that your testimony relates to is the combined use of the church with the adjunct or accessory affordable housing building, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And it's your testimony that if this was, instead of 3 parcels, 1 contiguous parcel, that we wouldn't require all the variance relief that we're requesting here this evening, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
And is it also your testimony that if the existing church was not there, that if we were able to, if we were, instead of constructing affordable housing around the church, if we were constructing a joint use building that had the church and the affordable housing, we also wouldn't need all the existing, or all the, excuse me, variances that we're requesting here tonight, correct?
True.
So it's really those 2 conditions, the 3 segregated lots and the existence of the existing church building that causes the hardship and requires the zoning relief that we're requesting this evening, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's all that I have.
I have a question for Mr. Donovan. So I don't know if you can answer this question or not, but when this were these roads put in after the property was bought, or were the roads there when these 3 parcels were bought?
I don't think I would be the best person to speak to that.
Okay.
Uh,
Can
yeah, I
anybody
think
speak
we-
to that for me?
The pastor is on, Pastor Evans is on. He could speak to that. He was a witness last time. And he was sworn in, so he was under oath and is still under oath. So Pastor Evans, could you speak to that?
Also,
Well-
if I may, could you also answer the question whether or not the church building itself was there when the church bought the parcels, or whether it was constructed subsequent?
Okay, Pastor Evans?
Well, the daycare was the original church. Well, when I came 28 years ago, and around that building was nothing but woods. The roads were
So-
already there.
So Pastor, the roads were there when you purchased the properties, correct?
No, the roads were there when I came to Bristol. The property was purchased before I came to Bristol,
Okay, okay, I
Okay.
see.
and the roads were already there. But where the existing church is now was nothing but wooded area.
Okay,
Okay, we tore down all the trees to be able to put up a new sanctuary, if you will.
Thank you.
Across the street
and
on
the
Watson.
daycare building that you referenced, that's the building that faces Watson with the crucifix on the front that's
That's
being
correct.
demolished as part of this, correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
That's the church that I was called to, and we made that the daycare.
okay.
Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, if we don't have anything else for Mr. Elko, I would like to call Elizabeth Rogan.
I got one more question for Mr. Elko.
Okay,
So, Mr. Elko, yes or no question? Have you ever done a project with this considerable amount of variances needing relief?
Hard to answer yes or no. I've been involved in many projects that needed relative types of relief. This one has a lot of variances. So there's, I acknowledge that there are a decent amount of variances here, but I've been involved in commercial projects that required long lists of variances, other residential projects that required lists of variances. So it's hard to compare each project. They're all unique.
Okay, thank you.
I think he was asking you an empirical question. We get there's relativity. He was just asking whether, have you ever dealt with a project with 27 variances?
That's exactly what I was asking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, you can continue.
okay, Greg, if you could stop sharing your screen. I don't think you have the comprehensive plan documents, right?
No, I stopped.
If we can get back to having me share my screen. All right, I'm pulling up the documents, so bear with me. Okay, I've got the documents up. And I'm going to share the screen. All right, I'm not seeing anything. Is anyone seeing anything?
Yes, we are, Bill. Exhibit 15A is partially up.
Okay. I'll try to expand it. Hold on here. Is that any better? Is that expanding?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not
Nope,
sure
now you
why.
just
When I'm
lost it.
sharing the screen, it's all I'm seeing are the video images of everyone who's on the call, but I'm not seeing the screen itself. So I'll battle through that. So Ms. Rogan, is your microphone unmuted?
Can you hear me?
We can. Good evening.
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And you've been on for the entirety of the hearing this evening,
I have.
and you've heard everything?
I have.
Okay. Could you state your full name for the board?
Elizabeth Rogan.
I swear in the witness.
Yes, yes, go ahead. That's it.
I'm also getting I'm getting a lot of feedback, so whoever can speak, please mute your microphone.
Yeah, I'm
Ms.
hearing
Rhodes,
that
if you
feedback.
could raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, just bear with me a second. Okay, again, so Ms. Rogan, your address.
411 Holly Lane in Wynwood, Pennsylvania.
Okay, what's your profession?
I'm a municipal planner, community development professional.
Okay, and you're currently self-employed.
I'm sorry. I
Correct.
didn't-
Are
I
you
didn't hear
currently?
the question, Bill.
She said, "Oh, Jim said the agent that was there. He said, you know, he's so funny. On his voicemail to her, he sees like, I hate to make this call. Like he seemed like he really,
Somebody's talking that doesn't
Hello,
want to be,
somebody-
I don't think.
I'm hearing some feedback or something.
There's conversation going on. Let's everybody mute their microphone unless you're talking.
Okay, and you're currently self-employed, correct?
Correct.
And you've provided me with the resume, which we've included at Exhibit 13E this evening, correct?
Correct.
That's 13E as in Edward.
Yes.
And could you briefly describe your educational background?
I have a bachelor's of art from the State University of New York in Binghamton in environmental studies and biology, and a master's in landscape architecture from the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry, which is in Syracuse, New York.
Okay. Do you have any professional certifications as a planner?
Yeah, I have my American Institute of Certified Planners, which is AICP. I have my AICP certification for a lot of years. I'm also licensed in New Jersey, which is not every state has a license requirement, but New Jersey does. Jersey also requires that you have an AICP certification. So I have both of those.
And Pennsylvania does not require a planner's license, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, can you briefly describe your employment history as a professional community planner, land planner?
Sure. Well, I primarily did public sector work, but I've also worked as a planner for on the private side, well, for private consulting services. They were for both municipal and private clients. So that was for 11 years when I was working for a consulting, providing consulting services. And the more substantial portion of my career was with working in Lower Merion Township as their assistant director and then the director of planning and community development. And I worked for the Lower Merion for 14 years. So I've got more than 25 years of planning experience.
And when you were with Lower Merion, how many of those 14 years were you head of the planning department and overseeing the staff?
It was a 10-person staff for both planning and we were a community development entitlement direct recipient for the block grant program. And so I ran both of those departments as the director for 7 years.
Okay, so 7 of the 14 years you were the director.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
and so in your 25 years of planning, what types of community and municipal planning tasks have you been involved in?
Just about all of them. So I've done comprehensive planning. I've done topical studies like open space, or done a lot of historic preservation and cultural and environmental resource planning and protection. I've done economic revitalization and
I'm sorry, what was the last one?
economic revitalization.
Thank you.
I've also written a ton of subdivision and land development and zoning ordinances and code amendments and map amendments. So I've done all of those various different planning
And as
endeavors.
as a planner, were you ever involved in preparing or amending the township's comprehensive plan?
Yeah, for Lower Merion Township, I was actually when I was on staff at Lower Merion Township, we actually did topical studies as opposed to big comprehensive plans. So I did a lot of specific studies for like open space or historic preservation that were adopted into the comprehensive plan that had initially been adopted in or the most recent at that time was 1969 or something. When I was doing consulting work, I managed the process for Upper Dublin Township to write and adopt their first comprehensive plan. So I have, and when I was and the third thing is when I was on the Board of Commissioners, it was a very long 10-year process to adopt the update to the comprehensive plan. So in 2016, the Lower Merion Township adopted its comprehensive infill and redevelopment plan, which is their comprehensive plan.
Okay, and what's the role of the comprehensive plan in a municipality?
In Pennsylvania, it's not a mandatory document, it's an aspirational document. So it sets forth the community's vision and goals for the future, depending upon where they are and where they want to go.
Okay, and does that then become the foundation for the zoning ordinance typically?
That is supposed to be what happens. In many cases, it's not what happens because of the fact that the comprehensive plan is aspirational and not legislative. There's oftentimes a lot of disconnect between not only just the zoning ordinance itself, but the reality of what's on the ground versus what's in the zoning code versus what's in the comprehensive plan. And I think that Bristol Township is an example, is emblematic of that type of discrepancy, where the zoning code doesn't match what's on the ground, which doesn't match what is in the vision for the future.
And the comprehensive plan really is the vision that the township council has for the future, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so at this point, I would ask that Ms. Rogan be accepted as an expert in land planning, community planning, land development, and zoning issues.
She would be accepted for that purpose, but what I would like her to do, if she's willing to, is what is the opinion that you're going to provide to the board that makes your expertise relevant to the board for tonight's hearing? I get that you're an expert in planning, but this is a relatively small project, all things considered, with a lot of variances. So what opinion are you going to be expressing to the board that's going to help them make a decision?
I don't know, Bill, if you want to address it, I can say that I think that one of the comments you had was how, 27 variances, is that an unusual thing? I think that my experience as a planner could be helpful to that effect. And I think that one of the points of getting a variance and one of the justifications for giving a variance is if it is in fact appropriate for the community and the neighborhood, and in keeping with the character of both the neighborhood and the intent of the codes. And I think that I can lend value there.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
I just want the board to understand the potential or proffered opinion or opinions that would be tendered, and you need to decide what use they are in these circumstances. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. So she was accepted as a professional land planner then, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that I heard
Oh,
that.
yeah. No, she's definitely an expert. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Ms. Rogan, your resume also indicates you were a Lower Merion Township Commissioner for 16 years, correct?
Yeah.
And how many commissioners were on the board?
There's 14 commissioners.
Okay, and of those 16 years as a commissioner, your resume indicates that for 5 years when you were actually the president of the commissioners, correct?
Yeah, for the whole time I was on the board, I served as the chairman of the Building and Planning Committee and on other committees as well. But for 5 years, I co-chaired so that I also served as the board president. And that's a position that's elected amongst your peers. It's not a decision made by the electorate. It's your associates and colleagues on the board choose their leadership.
Okay, so in your capacity as a commissioner, you made decisions on land development applications that were similar to what we're seeing here this evening many times, correct?
Yeah, I would have liked if they were more similar to this one, but they were of all types and kinds, and yes.
Okay. Now, with regard to the development pattern in Lower Marion Township, are there any similarities to what you saw? Or actually, let me just step back. Have you visited the site?
Yes, I did. I went on Saturday and it was very busy. There was lots of people there. I think there was lots going on with the food pantry.
Okay. And did you inspect the surrounding neighborhood or did you just look at the property itself?
I did know. I drove around. I didn't do a lot of walking because there was a lot of people there and COVID time. I didn't want to alarm anybody. But I would note that in my observations of the neighborhood, Mr. Elko talked a lot about the roads and the rights of way. The roads are themselves, the paved cartway is really narrow, and the rights of way are substantially larger than the cartways. And I think that differentiation adds to the part of the requirements for a lot of the setback variances that are required. In addition to the fact that there's 3 separate parcels, so the parking is off on a separate parcel. But yeah, I drove around. It was a hidden little gem.
Okay. So based on what you saw, are there similarities between the development patterns that exist in Lower Marion with the development patterns you saw on Saturday in Bristol Township?
Well, I think that there's similarities both in the local area, but in the township itself as a whole, because I think both communities are first ring suburbs of Philadelphia. They are really pretty much fully developed. So there's not a lot of space left over. What is left over is the small, less developable spaces, which is what I see here on this site and what I experienced in my career in Lower Marion, both professionally and as an elected official. So I think built out communities have as the primary type of development, it's either a redevelopment of an existing developed property that's underdeveloped, similar to what you see on the church's main property, and across the street at the what I thought was the food bank, it could be the daycare, and also the vacant parcel that is going to be turned into the small parcel 3, the small parking lot. So I think those are pretty similar. What's left over is tough to develop. It's usually out of context in terms of the size. It's usually challenging for a lot of those reasons, and it's trying to fit in things that have to work around what's existing. So those are very common between the two communities.
And is that working around what's existing, is that also characterized or termed infill development?
Yes, that is what infill development is. It's filling in the places that are empty.
Okay, and that's what we have here, correct?
Absolutely, it is not greenfield development, which is the other term that you could use. Not even close.
Okay. Now, in Lower Marion Township, did you have an issue with providing affordable housing? Was that a goal of the commissioners? Was it a problem in Lower Marion?
All of my years, from the time I was a professional working on staff to when I was on the Board of Commissioners, affordable housing is a huge issue in Lower Marion Township. And honestly, in my professional capacity as a planner, it's an issue almost everywhere in the surrounding suburbs of Philadelphia, and it's really suburban nationwide. It's a big issue, affordable housing. And if I think about Lower Marion and Bristol Township, it's sort of like Lower Marion was blessed and cursed because it was already developed and it was desirable because of its location. in the case in Lower Merion, it's
You're good.
really high land values.
All
So
right.
the entire time,
Sorry, I'm
Night,
sorry to hear you.
I'm tired. I'm tired. All right, night, Mom.
Microphone?
Let me see, is this light out? Okay,
Hello?
it's good.
We're
If you're
getting
not-
conversation.
If you're not speaking, please mute your microphone, please.
um,
So,
Mr. Rogan, you left off saying in the case of Lower Merion.
I think that the affordable housing issue was also really tied not only to the fact that there wasn't much land left, but that property values were really high. So when you have development coming into an existing established neighborhood, there's going to be a lot of concern there is going to be a lot of attention paid by the people that live in the neighborhood that exists. And in the case in Lower Merion Township, the neighborhood concerns usually related to the density that was required to do affordable housing. It's an expensive task. It's an expensive process. And to build quality projects to make them affordable and financially viable, you generally have higher density. So neighbors were concerned about that. They were concerned about the aesthetics and the difference between a single family neighborhood and a more dense development. They were also concerned about parking and street parking, and the fact that there was a concern that affordable housing would be demanding more parking. Generally, that fear was addressed by the fact that senior housing didn't require nearly as much parking, and the fact that affordable housing, in all of my experience, the affordable housing solutions required that there be reduced parking requirements because they were generally built in locations that were walkable, that were accessible to services, and people were living there because they didn't want to have the expense of a car. So the parking requirements ended up, while they were a fear, they were not a reality.
If Attorney Kerr, may I ask you, just in the interest of time, I think some of the information that's being provided is actually helpful to the board, but I don't think it matters what goes on in Lower Merion.
well, yeah, right.
If you could focus your questions on this project, we've accepted her as an expert and what her opinion is about the issues you want her to testify to.
Okay.
Here, not there.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, the issues that you see here in Bristol, are they similar to what you've just described in Lower Merion with regard to affordable housing?
I think based on this project, my understanding of this project is that it will be providing a lot of really important services, some of them being transportation to retail facilities, to the doctors, to the whatever other things are required of the neighbors. That's going to be part of the development. So I think that since it's an elderly development, my experience with these types of senior affordable housing is that even though it's developed for people who are 55 and older, the population is generally significantly older than 55 and tend to be people who are retired and no longer need 2 cars. Also, while most of the affordable housing places and providers that I know would like to see that there was a lot of visiting happening, a lot of people coming to visit their parents, that it's not the case in terms of people driving there. And a development of this size tends to be much more local. So visitors might just be walking there as opposed to driving there. So I think that there is a lot of similarity in terms of the affordable housing that's being proposed at this particular site and my experience in general, and then the just professionally found throughout the state and the country.
Okay. So could you describe, based on your visit to the site, how do you describe this neighborhood?
Well, it's a very mixed neighborhood. While you would look at the zoning map and think it was going to all be single family residential houses, that's not in fact what you see when you're on the ground. So the site itself is an institutional type of use, basically providing public services to the community. And community worship and daycare and those types of things. There are obviously single family houses as were described by Mr. Elko to the north and east of the site. There is, as was described previously, to the south of the site, there's the cross street is the larger commercial building that has that gun shop in it. And there's actually a driveway into the back of that site from Elwood, pretty close to the intersection of Norwood and Elwood. And so there's traffic coming in and out to the commercial use there on that what you might consider a residential street. So it's a mixed use activity. And the neighborhood itself has also the car auto service place, which is not a residential use. So, and then it has the utility transformer utility improvements that are on Elwood. So I think that it's a really mixed use area. It is not exclusively, as you would think when you look at the zoning code, to just be a residential neighborhood.
And does the connector between Route 13 and the Turnpike, does that have an impact on the neighborhood?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, Bill, I forgot that. It's the activity on the adjacent Route 13 is not only large just because it's a state Route 13 and it's got a lot of activity happening there, non-residential activity, but it also is by the Pennsylvania Turnpike access intersection. And there is, I think it's the highest trafficked area in Bristol Township, the Route 13 area, and that's in this location. So it is extremely impactful in terms of what development is appropriate in the area.
And are these types of, now is everyone seeing map 1, the land use map from the comprehensive plan on the screen? Are you seeing that?
I can see it, yeah.
You can see it, okay. Again, I can't tell if it's up or not, but I'm seeing it, but it's just not shared.
The land use map, but I would just say, Bill, the land use map that you're showing right now on this 15A is from the comprehensive plan. So it's the vision for the future. It's not necessarily what exists on the ground now, right, nor what it's zoned for right now.
Right. The vision for the future. Now, what I'm circling here with the cursor is the existing institutional church, correct? The parcels, correct?
Yes, it is.
Then this purple that's below that is the gun shop commercial property that fronts on Route 13, correct?
Yes.
And that's designated for manufacturing going forward, correct? Purple.
Correct.
Part?
Yes, that's correct.
And we have some commercial over here across the interchange from the Turnpike, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Which is a motel, I believe. Is that correct?
I'm actually not sure what's right there. I know there was a Wawa there because I went to that, but okay. I'm not sure which that one is. And the gray right there is the utility space. Small okay. Red to the west of the church property is the auto body shop, and then the blank spaces, at least in my picture, is vacant land that is owned by the same property owner, the same person who owns the auto shop owns those.
That's all. That's all these vacant, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Those are not shown on the comp plan as residential, correct?
No, they're shown as vacant.
How would you interpret what that means? The fact that they're not shown as residential as the sort of the aspiration of the township. Would that say to you that the township doesn't necessarily see those as wanting to develop those as single family residences?
Yeah, absolutely, because they're not, I mean, the lots themselves, if you look at the lots, they're tiny, they're small. You couldn't really put a house on it. It wouldn't be feasible to develop a lot of them with houses. So I think that it's, it's undetermined based on what I see on a comprehensive plan land use map.
Okay, so based on this comprehensive plan, do you believe that the proposal for this affordable housing building as an adjunct to the institutional use is appropriate for this neighborhood, again, based on what the council of the township has identified in its comprehensive plan?
Yeah, I think that they show in the comprehensive plan that it's institutional, its current use is institutional. I think that it's a perfect location for that type of use because it serves as a buffer to the existing occupied single family homes and protects that neighborhood, that existing neighborhood from the non-residential uses like what exists now, which is that gun range and commercial strip that's on Route 13 and the auto body shop that is next door to the church.
Okay, so this property with the residential will essentially buffer this residential neighborhood from what's happening or what's going to happen based on the township's aspirations to the areas closer to Route 13, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
What could you say about the health and welfare of the people that'll be living there, given its location, if you will, as a buffer between residential and commercial or industrial or manufacturing use?
Health and welfare of the residents that would live in this proposed project?
Yes.
I think that they would be really actually well served by the location. It's a multifamily development that's really accessible to, regional transportation routes, but it's also pedestrian friendly because of the neighborhood that it's sitting in. It's on a church property, so it is not on an industrial property or an institutional in the sense of a heavy industry use. The church is considered an institution. So I think that it's really, the residents there will be well served. It's very accessible to public services like the hospital and shopping. And it's also, while at the same time being regionally accessible, is pedestrian friendly. So people could leave the building and walk around the neighborhood without having to be worried about getting run over by cars, which is part of the reason why it's really nice. The roads are so narrow, even though the rights of way are large. People drive slow.
Okay, now, Ms. Rogan, I'm scrolling down to Exhibit 15B, if I can get it centered here. This is another plan that was pulled out of the township's comprehensive plan. This is map 4, which is special study areas.
Right.
This indicates a Route 13 special study area and it's not showing up in color, but what the comprehensive plan designates as residential opportunity areas.
Right.
And our site, as you can see with this arrow, is right on the juncture of the Route 13 opportunity area, residential opportunity neighborhood. What are the residential opportunity neighborhoods? Could you just describe, first of all, you reviewed the comprehensive plan, correct?
I have, yes.
Including the 2 sections that are attached at exhibits 15C and 15D, correct?
Yeah, I think that my comments would probably address both of those attachments for the board if I didn't have to point to them specifically. But this exhibit, this graphic, which I guess is the 15B, it identifies the 2 areas, as you mentioned, which are the residential opportunity zone and the Route 13 corridor. And this is the eastern side of the Route 13 corridor, which is basically a revitalization program for that main thoroughfare to try and encourage mixed use developments. So not only is it transitional in the existing use, but it's transitional in terms of its future in the township.
And so this basically indicates that the township envisions that as being a development area for commercial, institutional, and some higher density, higher intensity uses, correct?
Correct. That's the Route 13 and the housing, what's it called? The residential opportunity neighborhoods are identified areas that are really areas that are already have some work going on in terms of groups that are looking to improve the neighborhood and programs that are existing to address challenges, crime challenges, or public safety issues.
And those programs to address that would include, per the comprehensive plan, includes the possibility of developing newer housing, correct?
That's one of the key goals of the comprehensive plan. One of the clear things that were shown in the comprehensive plan was the fact that the housing in the township is almost 75% of it was built before the 60s because of Levittown. And it's extremely limited in terms of new development, new residential, high quality residential housing opportunities. And the diversity of the type of housing is also extremely limited. I think beyond just the housing types, one of the challenges that's talked about in the comprehensive plan is the fact that there have been several quote unquote age restricted housing developments that are done. So one of the comprehensive plan goals is that there be safe and adequate housing for the present and future residents of all socioeconomic characteristics. That's a stated goal. And there's two objectives that are in part of that goal. One is that the elected officials should monitor these age-restricted housing developments. And an age-restricted housing development is not an affordable senior housing project like what is being proposed. What's being proposed is basically an integrated program that is going to provide the residents invaluable support services that aren't found anywhere else. Things like transportation and the general health and wellness services that you mentioned when you talked about those non-residential pieces that are part of the ground floor of the building. The other piece of the objective of safe and adequate housing is the fact that infill development needs to be appropriate for its context and the setting. And given the fact that Bristol's fully developed with an aging population, this project would fit perfectly into what is needed. It's going to protect a single family residential neighborhood from more intrusive non-residential uses. It's going to serve a population that's right now underserved, and provide those people who live in the area now who can't keep up their houses with a place to be able to move to. The second goal that's in the comprehensive plan is that the township should provide needed and desired services within the constraints of the township's financial, within the township, addressing the township's limited financial means. And the fact of the matter is that if this proposal is really a perfect example of best management practices because it's a 3P. It's a public-private partnership, the public end being the nonprofit entities that have decided to come together to make this available to the public, to the community. Having well-established institutional citizens partnering with a private developer, with a community and neighbors that are looking forward and supportive of a development is really a unique opportunity. And it'll provide infrastructure that's really missing in the neighborhood. So I think it allows the ability of people to be able to age in place, to be able to stay around the people that they know and love and in the place that they know is really an unique opportunity that this is that this project represents.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. And while you were speaking, I was scrolling through the sections of the comprehensive plan, which you were talking to, because I think the highlighted sections reinforce the statements you were making. So I was just
absolutely, thank you.
So the board could see that. All right, so let's finish up. I just have a few final questions. I want to get to your opinions now. Do you have an opinion as to whether the proposal is consistent with the Township Comprehensive Plan?
Absolutely is. Yeah.
Okay. And do you have an opinion as to whether affordable senior housing is an appropriate adjunct use for this church on these properties that it owns?
Yeah, I think throughout the region and the state and this very specific location, regional institutions all over are doing this type of partnership where they can further their mission of serving their communities. So I think that, it absolutely is, this type of senior housing is an appropriate furtherance of the mission of the church, which is the institutional use that exists right now.
Okay, now, and as far as the neighborhood and what's in the neighborhood, do you have an opinion as to whether this proposal is appropriate for the neighborhood?
Yeah, as we discussed, that residential opportunity neighborhood is a demonstration of people already committed to their neighborhoods looking to make them better. And the Weed and Seed program is already in existence in this location. I think that this project furthers those endeavors, and the I think that as we already talked about, the fact of the intent of the Route 13 corridor planning is to revitalize and renew non-residential uses along the Route 13 corridor. That single-family residential neighborhood is going to need some buffer, a transition from the heavy non-residential into the single-family residential, and that's what this type of a project provides.
Now, you heard Mr. Elko's opinions that he stated about a half hour ago, correct?
Yes, I did.
And to the extent that those are opinions that are also in the purview of your expertise as a planner, do you agree with those opinions?
Absolutely, sure
Okay.
do.
Now, as far as any negative impacts on this neighborhood, do you think that this proposal would have any negative impacts on the neighborhood?
No, I don't.
And how about on the larger community?
I think it's going to be a tremendous asset to have some place that you can move to when you can't take care of your single family house anymore.
So you don't think it'll have a negative, you think it'll have a positive impact?
I think it'll be a very positive project, yes.
Okay, that's all that I have for Ms. Rogan.
Are you done with your presentation, Counselor?
Yes, that's all the witnesses that I have for this evening.
I turn it back to the chairman for questions or
I'm
any
sorry,
comments from the audience.
I was muted.
No
Anybody,
problem. I figured that.
anybody on the board have any questions for Ms. Rogan? I have one. I don't know. So as an expert, can you testify to any specific site in Lower Marion that's consistent with this project? Like 3 separate parcels and 27 variances?
Well, I think that the 3 separate parcels, 27 variances.
I'm having a hard time hearing her.
All right, can you
Should I try?
please, Ms.
Yeah,
Rogan?
start again, Liz.
So I think that as far as you're commenting with 27 variances and 3 parcels, if it was 1 parcel, there wouldn't be, 27 variances have to do with the fact that you've got setbacks on all of those 3 different parcels. And if you look at the list for 1 parcel versus all 3, you'll cut down the number. I haven't, I'm not the engineer and I haven't done the design, but I can tell you that the reason that the number is so high is because you're talking about 3 sites, not 1. And I think the other thing is a comparable project between Lower Marion Township and there isn't. That's why I said at the very beginning, there isn't really a comparable project in my previous work experience in Lower Marion, because we don't have that developable land. When we've done them, they've been affordable housing project was very small. One was done on multiple jurisdictions between Radnor Township and Montgomery Radnor Township and Lower Marion Township, right on the border on a Verizon transfer station. So a utility lot was converted into affordable housing. That did have issues, but it was between 2 different municipalities as opposed to different lots. And the other projects that we've had were older, like in the 60s, and they were done. The one big one, which is the Ardmore Affordable House, that was all 1 property. It used to be a school, and the school was torn down. So it was just lucky that they found a large lot. Those, as I mentioned, there had to be, the way that they did it was to have new legislation written that reduced the parking requirements, because none of those developments required the amount of parking that a single family residence would require. They didn't require 2 spaces per unit. They didn't require one visitor per unit. It was a substantially different demand for parking, and the activity that was happening on those sites was not comparable to a single family residential unit.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, thank you. Mr. Kerr, are you done with your testimony?
I'll have a short closing. We do have some neighbors, I believe, that are on that would like to testify in support.
I will get to them when you're done your testimony. So,
Okay, yeah, that's all the testimony we have. Again, when we hear everything from the neighbors, I will have just a brief closing I'd like to make.
Okay.
Okay.
I would rather you do your closing now if you.
Okay, I can do that. So I'll do that now. This is clearly a unique situation. I don't think any of us can say that we've seen this many variances or on probably any project that we worked on. We may have seen something similar to this, but this is a significant amount of variances. But it's really based on the unique opportunity that's presented here for the township. This is we have a pastor that's done some really good things in this community for many years. He has this vision to take his church property and turn it into not only a place where people can worship, but the seniors can live, whether they're affiliated with his church or not, and make this their home base. To do that, he has to put it on property that he controls. And so we have what we have, which is the 3 parcels which were divided by the roadways. We have the sort of the unique configuration of the main parcel with a little notch out of it. But that's what he has. And he also has the existing church. And again, Mr. Elko indicated that if the church wasn't there, we could probably do a much more compact building that encompassed both the church, the worship area, and the housing without having this many variances. So it's really the confluence of the 3 parcels and the fact that the existing church is there that requires all these variances. So our fundamental position here is that this is a very reasonable use. You heard Mr. Morgan testify that he's done a number of similar projects where churches sponsored and constructed affordable, or he helped construct affordable housing with the church on or near the church property. So it's a very unique proposal, but it's one that's been done in the past, and it's reasonable. It's a reasonable adjunct use for a church. And what we get then is we have a reasonable use. We have some hardship based on the property and the existing church, and these variances that are required because of all of that are it's not a minimum number, but it's the minimum number that allows us to build this reasonable use given all the situations that exist. So we think that there is some basis for the board to grant all these variances, despite the fact that there is a fairly long list. Again, because it goes back to this being a reasonable use, transitional use in the neighborhood. And something that, because of the developed nature of the neighborhood, the fact that we're looking at infill parcels is all reasonable. And another key aspect of this key aspects is that we haven't heard, there is one neighbor that's opposing, but you'll recall from last month that we held 2 meetings with the public. One of those had 45 or so attendees. The other one had 30 or 35. And of those, it was, sort of a unanimous sentiment that folks really supported this proposal, this reasonable proposal in this neighborhood. And added to that, we have the fact that we've been with the township commissioners, township council. I'm drawing a blank as to whether the commissioners or council. We met with them twice, and after we made some modifications to the plan to add parking after the first meeting, they were very strongly in support of it. So we have when you look at the aspects of the variance standards that relate to community harm or negative impact, we don't have any of that. We have very positive sentiment. We don't have anyone that's really concerned about negative impacts, other than the one neighbor who testified. And I believe they're here again tonight. And there were some discussions, I can tell you, between the pastor and them. I'm not sure what their position is. They'll state that. But we've done a lot to try to ameliorate any negative impacts. And we think that we have all virtually unanimous positive sentiment in the neighborhood. So we believe that there is the basis under the hardship standards, the variance standards, even given the number of variances we're looking for this board to grant this proposal.
Yeah, and I would just, we're not here in person, and I have to provide my board with advice when I think it's necessary. And I agree that you've made a comprehensive presentation. The only thing I would take exception with, and by the way, I agree that the shapes of the lots and the roads that pre-existed, all that is justifiable fodder for considering hardships. I don't think the church building is, because it was constructed by the church, and you can't create your own reasons for hardship, which has been done in this case. So absent that, that's the only objection I have to what you've said as a legal matter.
Okay.
And I think my board needs to know that, unless you have something different to tell me.
Yeah, well, there is, Mr. Fetterman, and I can provide you with this. There is some, I hear your point. There is some case law out there that says that if you need to remove existing improvements to eliminate variances, that would constitute a basis for granting variance relief. So you shouldn't. So
Okay.
the gist of that is that you shouldn't have to remove existing improvements to make your property more compliant with the zoning code. So
I'm not. You haven't provided those opinions, so I'm not in a position to consider them.
Okay.
That's all I want to say.
Okay.
I'm certainly not speaking against the project in any way.
No, I understand.
Okay, Mr. Scott, you have anything to add?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay, so now it's at this point, we're going to hear from anybody that'd like to speak for or against this project. I'm not sure how we're going to do this one at a time, but if you got something to say, please come unmute and state your name and address for the record, please.
And they'll have to be sworn in.
You have to be sworn in also.
Hi, my name is Megan Winkowitz.
Okay, can you raise your right hand, please?
I can.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Can you spell your last name, please?
WENCLEWIC, C as in Charlie, Z as in zebra.
Thank you.
And our address is 1242 Norton Avenue, Bristol, PA. So me and my husband we factually heard this. I talked to Pastor the other day, this past Saturday, he stopped by, and I did inform him. The first time we heard of this was actually on Levittown Now as a news article. We both heard of it from there. I never received a flyer. We never received anything for any type of neighborhood meeting. We drive Norton Avenue multiple times a day. We both work full time. We have 2 children, never saw signs posted on any pole or anything. Not saying that they weren't there, but I never received a flyer. If I did, I would have went to the meeting. Once I heard this and we got our letter in the mail, we've been at every single zoning board meeting that there was about this. The first one that it was continued, last one, and then this one. I have a list of things that me and my husband kind of discussed. I've talked to a few other neighbors around us, again, that weren't in the radius of the picture of seeing that being notified. But again, in the vicinity of this neighborhood. like Liz Rogan said, this is a hidden gem. We moved here 5 years ago, just about 5 years ago now. We have 2 kids. We moved with our daughter. We've had a son now. We love it. We have our dogs, our cats here. All we've been doing is improving our house, new roof, putting new windows in, building up, taking a tree out, really trying to update everything on this house and updating the inside of the house. We want to make this our forever home. We want our kids to grow up here. Seeing this come in is kind of worrisome due to the fact of a ton of things. Safety on this street is a huge thing. I've been in contact with Sergeant Burns. If you've driven Norton Avenue, you notice the slow signs painted on the ground. That was to do with me and Sergeant Burns, me reaching out to him. We've added 1 speed sign on the street and a slow sign, and that is it. It has not impeded any of the traffic flow and the speeding. I've asked for directed patrols. I was told that they are stretched too thin. They cannot do directed patrols here. So it's worrisome that we're adding a 56 unit with God knows how many more people to our neighborhood, which is a hidden gem. It is quiet here besides the through traffic. It's scary to know that if I'm walking, I have how many other people around and there's more cars added to the traffic of this area and we can't get any support from the police. So that's a concern for me. Adding these parking lots is a concern that who's monitoring these parking lots? Who's going to make sure that, no one's sitting in the parking lots throughout the night doing whatever, it's huge. That's a huge safety concern. I know I talked to the pastor about background checks. That was never brought up. And once this whole thing was never brought up, concerning to me as a parent and as a community member and as a neighborhood, being a part of this neighborhood, is that who's moving into these houses? I have 2 young children. I know my neighbors down the street from me have young children. A lot of us around here do. Who knows who's moving into them? And yes, if it was a single family home, who knows what moved there? But this is something that is being affordable. This is something that is being at a lesser amount of money to these people. What are they going through? What is the continuous background checked to these, for these residents? How often are they doing it? And then who's enforcing, I know I talked to Pastor Evan too about this, is the people in there. Who's stopping grandmom from having her grandkids and, everyone living with her there, and he said that there'll be a front desk people, but who's enforcing that no one gets in and stays in and doesn't ever leave? Who's enforcing all those things? Who's paying for the salaries or the hourly rates of everyone from the front desk people to the maintenance crews to, I know we talked about security, all those types of things. Who's paying for all of that? Another big thing for me and my husband is our house value and our taxes. I know I just can't say that there's no proof to me that none of this will happen, that my house value will not go down. My house value has only grown. We don't want to allow something that can take our house value down, say when we get older and we want to move out and we want to retire and we want to go somewhere else, we can't sell because our house value is lower, because there is almost a retirement community down the street, a nursing home almost. We've talked in the previous, the last zoning board meeting we had, they talked about, kind of what's going on in that community. Like, there's so much for me. Events, parking, I'm looking at my list here. I'm sorry, I'm just keep going down it. Parking events. I've had people ruin my grass. I've had people block my driveway in during funerals and events at the church. And I told Pastor about that and he was unaware of it, but it happens. So to say that there's only 60 something parking spots might not hold all the people. I've had it happen to me. I've had people park on my lawn and ruin the things that I've done and the money I spent to beautify my house and beautify the surrounding neighborhood. I've had that ruined. I've had to then take the steps to and spend the extra money to fix those things. We've had, parties at the house for our kids' birthday parties and stuff. And the SEPTA bus can't get through these streets if there's cars parked on the street. They struggle. There's a SEPTA bus. There's a bus stop here right across the street from us. They struggle to get that bus down the street. How are we going to put parking on these streets and add this extra, parking in cars to this area when we don't have it. We don't have safety around here for people to walk. And we're just going to add all these people to it. My biggest thing too is fire alarms. I know you guys have all that in there, but when these fire alarms go off, they go off kind of frequently in multifamily residents when, you have people up at all times of night. What happens at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning when it's consistently going off and my kids are awake at night? We can't sleep at night because there's fire engines going, there's fire alarms going. What happens to my family? I guess there's a lot to, for us to think about. And I wish we would have been notified earlier in this. I mean, once I did find out, we've been here ever since, and we've been concerned about it ever since. So that's kind of my view on it, my husband's view on it. That's kind of where we're at. That's kind of all I have. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Mr. Chairman, this is Bruce Morgan. I'm the developer. Can I respond to that? I can't hear you. You're muted, Mr. Chairman.
You can respond.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you. I couldn't hear you. Ma'am, I'm very sorry you didn't get invited because we discussed many of those topics during our community outreach meetings. And I apologize for somehow or another, you didn't get invited. But if I could, I'd like to respond. I've been building senior communities in Pennsylvania and New Jersey for about 20 years now. Many of the communities are very similar to this. I've done 7 communities recently in the last 6 or 7 years with churches who make great partners because they're such longstanding members of the community. That being said, the development company I partnered with, Ingerman, has built about $1.7 billion of affordable housing over the last 25 years. And we don't get a track record like that if we build bad projects, because we simply will have a terrible reputation and we won't get invited back to communities. I think what you'll find, if you look at our websites, you look at our communities, they're absolutely beautiful communities, and they're really upstanding members of the community, which once the buildings are built, they lead to increased property values. But that being said, based on my experience, I can say with utter certainty, we will not need a lot of parking. And that's how we came to our parking count, which Mr. Elko talked about, that will go in the three lots. Those lots will be lit at night, and there will be cameras on those lots. Additionally, my staff, the management staff, there's a maintenance person and a manager. They work 40 hours a week, every week, but they're on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they're very much on call. We have a service. If there's any problems, they get called, they come to the site. So they take care of this. All residents go through extreme background checks. It literally takes us, based on the experience I just said, I can tell you with certainty that we look at about 10 applications for every one that comes into the community that are accepted into the community. Everybody, in addition to having a credit check, which is normal in an apartment living, but everybody also in our communities has a criminal background check. Any evidence whatsoever of any kind of violent crimes immediately precludes you from residency in our community. Now, you have to understand, this is a 55 and older community, so we're not talking about young families. We have a lease that everybody must sign and a community handbook, which outlines the rules of the community. So if your grandchildren move in for a period of time in excess of 2 weeks, that is subject to eviction. People take this very seriously. The communities that we built are so beautiful, they do not want to leave. Typically, our typical resident moves in somewhere in their 70s. These are independent care facilities, so that these residents live on their own, and they typically pass away, unfortunately, sometime many years later. They do not want to leave. They're very upstanding members of the community. As Mr. Elko said, we'll be putting sidewalks around our properties. There are no sidewalks in your community right now, so we're going to be adding those to the community. We think that will be beneficial to the community. There'll also be lights on the properties. There'll be glare shields, so we won't be impacting the neighbors in any way. But our property will be lit up, and there will be exterior and interior cameras for security purposes. So if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to spend an infinite amount of time answering your questions. But I can assure you that this will be a very, very upstanding addition to the community, which will improve property values in every way, based on experience.
And Bruce, just one additional point you should make is to the impact of having PHFA oversight.
Additionally, there's two things. The state government gives us our tax credits, which is how we finance our project. And that comes with an awful lot of strings. The first string is there's a deed restriction. The deed restriction goes and is recorded at the time of the construction loan closing. What that says is that for then on, it's a 55 and older community, and that can't be changed. It's deed restricted. Number two, the incomes are dictated by the state. There's different levels, but those incomes have to be maintained, and that's deed restricted as well. We are audited every year, and all of our lease files, which the leases are 1-year leases, they have to be renewed when they end, and they're renewed and inspected every year by the state of Pennsylvania. So the state of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, is the overseer of this project, and they ensure that we do what we've committed to doing.
Mr. Morgan, she also mentioned about the taxes.
The taxes, we're going to pay our taxes, and everybody else will as well. I don't anticipate, based on my experience, that the taxes from the residential homes in the area will go up. That your house won't get reassessed because of my property. So because your house won't get reassessed because of my property, your taxes shouldn't go up.
I have a question for Mr. Kerr. Would you consider this to be an age-qualified residential community? Is that?
Yes, because
Okay.
the residents will have to qualify. They'll have to be 55 and older.
Okay, so here we have a board dealing with 27 variances. The conditional use allowed under an R3 includes an age-qualified residential community. Now, you've been to the township twice. Did you ask for a conditional approval?
This was the track that was sort of laid out there as the appropriate track for us to follow.
And who did that?
There were a number of others we could have followed, including that one, or the reason.
I'm sorry, you guys are talking over top.
Yeah, it's okay. I said, who put you on that path? Was it township council?
Bruce, can you weigh in on that, or Pastor?
I can't.
Well, okay.
Weigh in on the fact that we're supposed to go to the zoning committee?
Well, township council has the ability to override. If there's a conditional use, they can approve it. I mean, basically. So it's not a permitted use. It's not a special exception, but I do see it as qualifying for conditional use, which can be permitted and authorized by council.
Yeah, I think though there still would have been variances that would have been required for the dimensional issues.
I'm just wondering if they approved it subject to getting variances. That's what I'm trying to figure out. The township council approved this project.
Not as a conditional use, but they indicated they support the application. And they support the application to the zoning board. So
I just want my board to be clear on this. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Tom Scott.
Yes.
So
Tom.
there was no a formal application as a conditional use.
Go ahead, Tom. I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay.
The applicant's appearances before council were with a sketch plan application, which is, a very informal process. There was no formal land development or conditional use or any other application filed. It was just two presentations, one in December, one in January, at the sketch plan phase. The council was not required and did not take any votes on the issue. So it was just an airing of an idea and the sharing of an idea.
Okay, and were they aware that 27 variances were required?
Well, they talked about the things that they normally would talk about for land development, what the impact would be on public services on the immediate area. And there was substantial discussion about the off-street parking because that was the one issue that they had the most questions about, which was then addressed by the applicant, and the new plan was submitted.
Okay, thank you.
And the applications were submitted essentially contemporaneously. So it was, the township was aware at the time we met with the council that we required zoning variances for this proposal.
Thank you.
I have one more question. This is Megan again, about the background checks and stuff. So once they get into there and they do a background check, how often are these background checks run? Are they run every year, every 5 years? How often are they ran? Because nothing's stopping Grandpa from committing crimes once he's in the building.
Well, with all due respect, I just don't think that's a very fair comment. We run a professional organization. If you have a criminal, violent background, you're precluded. If you go to our communities and see them, and they're on our website, both mine, BCM Affordable Housing, and in my partner's Ingerman, these are beautiful. They look in every way like market rate communities. It's very difficult to get in. And I can tell you with utter certainty, based on 20 plus years of experience of doing this, that residents, once they get in, they do not want to leave. We don't have criminal elements in our properties, especially our senior properties. These people are paying rent. I mean, it's not like they're living for free. They have to pay rent to live in this community.
And I understand that. And it's not an inappropriate comment when I have 2 children that I live with that I have to grow up in this area. So it is a very big concern of mine for something that is coming in.
I totally appreciate your children, and I think that that's wonderful. And I maintain that our residents will be very upstanding members of your community, and we will do the background checks to preclude people with poor histories from entering your community.
And Bruce, if you find out someone were to have done something after they move in, you have the ability to evict them, correct?
Correct.
Right. Is there anyone else that has comments against the project? Because again, I think we have some neighbors that would like to speak for the project.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Cindy Murphy. I wanted to, Bruce, you were talking about management of the housing. Can you speak to maybe some management issues relative to Ingerman in the past with maybe Division of Community Affairs on some of their projects?
In what regards? I don't have any issues in any of my properties with, you're talking about Pennsylvania Department of Community Affairs?
I'm speaking about New Jersey Division of Community Affairs.
New Jersey, DCA. Yeah, we have a lot of properties in New Jersey as well. I'm not, DCA is the central agency in New Jersey, which oversees the New Jersey Housing Mortgage Finance Agency. So in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency issues the tax credits. In New Jersey, it's the New Jersey Housing Mortgage Finance Agency. DCA oversees NJHMFA, and to the best of my knowledge, I don't know of any issues with NJDCA. We have a great relationship with them. we are one of the largest developers of affordable housing in New Jersey, and we repeatedly get 3 or 4 projects funded every year. So if we had an issue with them, they wouldn't give us credits.
Okay, well, I see some issues from 8 years ago. Now, 8 years ago sounds like a long time ago, but it's concerning.
Yeah, I don't know unless you could specifically tell me about them. You have to also understand, Ingerman has 4 or 5 other developers, and I'm only involved in my projects. I do hear things about other projects, but specifically something that happened 8 years ago, I'm not familiar with it. I'd be more than happy to provide you with references.
I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, I can hear it too.
Your microphone, maybe?
I haven't touched it. I could provide you with references both for my firm and also for Ingerman.
All right, so maybe if we can just get some follow-up on the arbors over in New Jersey.
What's the
Just
full name
something
of that
that-
project? Because I don't know of any project called the Harbors.
I'm sorry. There's a lot of background noise. If anybody's not speaking, please mute your microphone.
Arbors Apartments over in
Arbors.
Arbors.
Yeah. If you could either tell me offline or give me more information, I could definitely follow up with you on that.
And all right, and another issue as well. All right, thank you.
Anybody else like to speak against this project?
Can I just, the Arbors was sold, so I'm not sure. I recall, Ingerman no longer owns the Arbors, so I don't know whether the issues that arose were related to Ingerman or related to the current owner.
Well, Ingerman commented on it himself, and didn't state that he was no longer the owner of it.
Yeah, I don't know exactly when. That was not one of my communities. That's a family community. That was a rehab, and it's a totally different community. It's about 14 stories tall, and there's 3 towers.
No, I understand it's different, but when you were talking about the management of the facilities, I thought it would come in line with that. You were speaking about management, so I brought up management. That's the tie-in that I was alluding to.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else want to speak on this project, for or against this project?
Hi, I'd like to speak.
Yeah, state your name and address, and you have to be sworn in, please.
Okay. My name is Juanita Tiggett-Slayton. My address is 2211 Ericoper Street here in Bristol Township.
Cindy, can you swear in?
Please.
Yes,
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Sorry, it took me a while to get my hand up. So I wanted to state that I'm a member of Norton Avenue First Baptist Church, but I'm also a member of the community. My community is not very far from where the church stands right now. And I participate in a lot of programs that come from there, and I support all that happens through Norton Avenue, no longer bound in any way that I can. So the one thing that I wanted to say about the project is that it would replace some older buildings. So the concern about fire or disrepair or things like that, this is bringing something new and modern to the community, as well as providing a service for people who are in need of better affordable housing. And I think that bringing a better, more modern facility or, to the community, I think will improve a lot of the neighbors as well, expecting to have people who are elderly that have a bad background is kind of unfair. There's not much control as a neighbor over who buys a home near you or around you, or who even travels through there. But I feel like all of the provisions that are being proposed here are all of benefit to the community as well as the new facility. And I just think I'm excited about the project, and I hope that it's exciting for everyone else as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak? We'll take a couple more.
Hi, yes, good evening. I would like to speak. My name is Marlon Williams. I live at 5801 Beaver Dam Road here in Bristol Township, which is right down the street from the proposed project at the corner of Beaver Dam and Norton Avenue.
Would you please raise your hand?
Certainly, let me see here. There it is.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Absolutely. Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, so I've actually lived in this same property that I live in now since I was 9 years old. I'm 47 now. My parents previously owned our home, and it burned down about 20 some odd years ago, and then me and my wife purchased it and rebuilt the property. So we've been here. We're lifelong residents of this community, and stand in absolute support of a project like this that would, number one, beautify our community, also potentially bring jobs to our community. And we see a lot of development in our general area that rarely benefit our community at the grassroots level. In a project like this, we certainly wholeheartedly would support for that reason. Again, we see a lot of projects that benefit others, not in our community. So to have an opportunity where there would be a project of this magnitude that would not only potentially create jobs, but would raise property value, and have a benefit of a population that's growing by leaps and bounds. When you talk about our elderly, where so many of our elderly have to leave their homes and their communities to get this type of support. We certainly see this as a good thing, that Norton Avenue has been a steward and a mainstay in this community. It's actually the oldest African American church in our community, and has done tremendous work in supporting the community, in addressing many of the social issues in our community, and we believe come to the table with the best of intentions for improving our community. Definitely don't see it as a detriment at all. So we certainly, me and my family certainly wholeheartedly back and support what these particular efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
May I address the council?
Yes, who's this, Reverend Evans?
Yes,
Pastor
it
Evans?
is. Pastor James Evans. I've already been sworn in.
Okay.
Being the pastor of Norton Avenue for 28 years, I can tell you that because we have been a staple in the community itself, the fact that documented we feed 25,000 a year, documented that through our No Longer Bound program. We have programs for our children. We have programs for type 2 diabetes. And these are some of the programs that we would bring to the residents because we would be involved in making sure that we provide some of the things that would be necessary and that they would have a fellowship with us where we could minister to them, that we can provide some of the things that they need, and the fact that many of our senior citizens seriously have to almost choose between their prescription and food. And we want to position ourselves to be able to minister to them, to be able to support them. And it's not about doing anything other than trying to do the best we can for our community. Over 28 years, we have done numerous things for programs for our young people and for the community itself. So we feel very positive about the fact that we could do greater works. And that's one of our themes, doing greater works to provide this community to take it to another dimension.
Thank you. Okay, I'll take one more person if anybody wants to come up and speak.
Hi, I'd like to say a few words.
Good, state your name and address for record. You'll have to get sworn in, please.
Sure, Demita Harvey Harris, and my address is 4105 Portsmouth Court, Bensalem, PA.
I'm sorry, 4105.
Portsmouth Court.
Can you raise your right hand, please?
Sure.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, so I am a member of Norton Avenue's First Baptist Church. I grew up in Bristol Township, and I do a lot of volunteering within Bristol Township. So one of the things that we do, I work for No Longer Bound Prevention and Training Services, and we get a lot of calls from time to time for people who are looking for some type of assistance that may be a little bit down in their luck. What I'm looking at this project, and the reason why I'm supporting it, is because there's a need for affordable housing in Bucks County. We know a lot of people who are calling the helpline right now are people who have been they're currently working, but maybe the amount that they're receiving isn't enough to pay their rent and then also, take care of themselves. So this project will help people who are 55 and older, and we know that is a need within our county. So that's why I fully support this initiative for the senior housing in the area. One of the things we do too at No Longer Bound is we do the programs for our children. So the children's safety is of our utmost concern. We have several programs through the church, and there's actually a daycare in the area. So, we would also be looking to make sure that the people who are staying in this facility are of good character because of the programs that we do hold. And, we're constantly trying to make our neighborhood and the services and opportunities for our families better. So I just wanted to just share that information and say how I support Pastor's vision, and I love the opportunity for them there to be on-site medical care, which we know that some of our seniors have a lot of medical appointments. So for them to be able to go downstairs and receive that will be a great benefit to them as well. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to at this point, I'm just going to apologize to anyone that didn't get a chance to speak, but in fairness to the board and time restraint this time, I think we're going to hold off on any more public comments because we've heard for against this project.
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask, there are a number of folks on the call. If you could just have them, folks that are not part of our team, if you could just ask them to raise their hand if they support, if they haven't already spoken, just so you have a sense for how many others are in support. If that might be helpful.
Could you tell us the number? Do you know?
I don't know the number, but I think everyone should have an opportunity to raise their hand, and then we could just count up those.
I agree with you. I'm just trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, I'm not.
Okay.
If they're on the Zoom call, there's they see the box for the Zoom. There's a reactions button on the bottom, and you could do a smiley face or a thumbs up or a clap or something that shows like you're doing a motion, and you can, whoever's hosting the call will be able to see that.
So if anyone who hasn't spoken, if they could just do a thumbs up, if they support the project.
I see Mr. Mulkeen has done it, and Ms. Matt Evans has done it.
Mr. Scott, can you see that?
Yes.
Can you give me a number when you get a chance?
It actually disappears after a little while. It's hard to keep.
About half a dozen.
The raise hand stays up a little longer.
I
It's
count
like 6 or 7.
I count 10.
That's what I'm seeing. So that's what we were looking for, I think. So thank you.
11, 12, 13.
All right, we'll go with Baker's dozen. How's that? Yeah, it's getting kind of late, so if nobody has anybody from the board have any other questions, I think we're at the point now where I'm going to ask for a motion to approve or a motion not to approve. So you guys tell me.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Sue Lewis. I need a second. Okay, then if I cannot get a second on approval, I need a motion to not approve and a second.
I'll make a motion not to approve.
Is that Colleen Dunn?
Yes.
Motion not to approve. I need a second, either on approval or not to approve. All right, I'm going to make a motion not to approve. So I'm going to call the board on a motion not to approve. Colleen Dunn,
Yes.
Ed Murphy,
Yes.
Sue Lewis,
No, I would like to approve.
and Jim McMahon, yes. Okay, that's so it's 3-1 not to approve. All right, that's it.
Okay, thank you for taking us this evening on this special hearing. We appreciate that. We appreciate your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I'm gonna need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Colleen Dunn. I need a second.
I'll second.
A second by Ed Murphy. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. All right, thank you very much, everyone. See you next week.
Bye.
Thank you.